Hey, what's up? What do you say we get started in three, two? Today on the It's Been a While Says podcast, I'm going to be sharing 7 audio lessons I've learned over the last couple of weeks, a couple of tips on how to save money on travel, and other stuff too, so go ahead and stick around. Let's start with the audio lessons that I've learned, and the reason that I've learned so many audio lessons is over the last couple of weeks, I have been editing, mixing, processing, and reviewing a live concert recording and video, and through that process, it is like I was drinking from a fire hose. It was like I dove into the deep end of a pool and then drank up the entire pool. So I wanted to share the information that I have gained to hopefully save you a couple of headaches that I wish I had avoided. The first lesson is fairly obvious to everybody. Studio mic technique and stage microphone technique are not the same thing for very specific reasons. The way that I learned this lesson was reviewing my vocal microphone. I was behaving on stage as though I was in a studio. And in a studio, I'm a couple inches away from the microphone because when you get too close to the microphone, it just doesn't sound the best. You want a little bit of space between yourself and the microphone. On stage, if you're 3 inches away from the microphone and you got a drummer a couple of feet behind you, all you're going to hear is the drums. All you're going to hear is the bass. The signal-to-noise ratio is just completely and utterly destroyed. So if you want to do any kind of corrections, it's impossible. If you want to do any kind of edits, it is extremely difficult. If you want to avoid feedback, it's going to be a nightmare because you just got to crank up that microphone and you're just getting all the bleed from the drums, the bass, the guitar, everything else on stage. So on stage, your lips ought to be touching the grill of the microphone. And this is something I should have remembered because I did a comparison between a couple of handheld dynamics to see which one was best. And in that video, I did a lip test, which sounds very weird. A lip test. I put my lips against the grill of the microphone to see how they sound. And when you do that, the really big presence treble and air boost on a lot of these handheld microphones makes so much sense, because it's simply offsetting the massive proximity effect when your lips are touching the grill and you clip the preamp. So that is something I should have remembered, and I should have behaved differently on stage because the bleed was unbearable. You could barely hear my voice over the drums. Now, something I did to try to salvage this was use AI. I know AI is a bad word to a lot of creatives, but I was trying to salvage what I could, so I ran my microphone through one of those AI vocal isolators and pulled out just my voice, and it removed all of the bleed from the instruments. Unfortunately, it is incredibly artifacty and does not sound very good. But in my favor, I am not a lead singer. I just do very distant background vocals and harmonies, so that's fine if it's a little bit artifacty. I found something that helped was throwing on a Neve preamp and just adding some distortion, and then of course running reverb into it, and that just masked a lot of the artifacts. And because I'm mixed so far back, it's fine. I couldn't use this method on the lead singer because it would just sound terrible. It would sound like a digital singer, some kind of AI anime girl singing or something. Maybe that would actually be good. That's the first lesson I learned. Second lesson, bleed is an absolute nightmare. If you don't know what bleed is, it is when sound sources other than the sound source you're miking up make its way into the microphone. So this is my vocal microphone right now. If a guitar was playing over in the corner, that would make it into the microphone. That would be bleed. Having bleed on these microphones makes edits, makes corrections, makes improvements in post so much more difficult. It makes even processing the audio more difficult because when you compress the vocals, you're also compressing all that other information that is being captured. Drums are in every single microphone. Guitar mics, bass mics, well, not bass mics, it's DI bass. Vocal mics, anywhere and everywhere, drums are in it. Bass is in everything because it's omnidirectional. So it's very hard to make those corrections and fixes in post. So if you're looking to get perfect, you're not going to. On the note of getting perfect, this is something that I was told. I did not fact check this. I don't know how accurate it is, but I was told a lot of the bands that put out live concert footage, live concert DVDs, that isn't necessarily a live performance. They will go back and touch up the recordings. They will re-record the guitars, the bass, maybe not the drums, maybe they'll use the live drums. They'll re-record the vocals just to make sure it's as good as it can possibly be, just to ensure they get isolation so they can process it as best as they can. I would love to learn more about this and understand how they do it, if they do it, who does it, why do they do it? But it is a fascinating idea that these live concerts aren't actually live. My theory would be they film the concert, great, they have the energy, they have the crowd, they have the drum take. Then afterwards, they just leave the mic set up, come back the next day, re-record the guitar, re-record the vocals in the venue, running through the PA, so they get the room sound, so they get everything the same guitar tone, same everything, and then just replace that in the actual mix. Then they get that isolation, then they get that good performance, but they still have the energy from the audience. They still have the energy in the drums. So that's my theory, but if there's anybody out there listening to this who does work on that kind of project, I know some of you probably have done that, I would love to hear the actual process that they go through. Do they use the live setup at the same time to re-record, or do they go into the studio later and try to match the tone? Or do they not care about matching the tone and just replace everything? Just all the guitars. No, we're not going to use any of that. Let's redo it all. The next lesson that I learned is something that I was kind of already leaning into. I love preamp distortion. Some of the recorded tracks were not necessarily lifeless, but a little bit low energy and maybe a bit too sterile. And throwing on a Neve preamp emulation and just distorting it a bit made it so much more exciting sounding, and it brought certain sounds to life. So I am just a complete convert. I used to think, oh yeah, clean. That's how all the recording should be. Just make sure it's not clipping, make sure there's no distortion, you're good to go. And now I just want to put distortion on everything. I just want Neve distortion or just preamp distortion on anything and everything in a recording because I just think it sounds so much more exciting. Next is not an audio lesson that I've learned. I don't even know what lesson number this is, but this is concert video related. Having video with different FPSs is the bane of my existence. If you don't know what FPS is, that is frames per second. You can have videos with different frames per second, 24, 29.97, 23.98, 30, 60, 50. And I got 4 angles from this concert, many of which were different frame rates. I had 30, 29.97, and 24. First thing I did was try to match all the videos to 29.97 because that was the primary angle. I couldn't get 30 to match up in that project. I couldn't get 24 to match up in that project, even though Final Cut Pro X says, yeah, we'll go ahead and match it. We have all these algorithms that'll make it work. Nope, did not work. The only workaround that I found was creating a new 24 frame per second project, dropping each video in there, whether it's 24, 29.97, or 30, syncing that individual video file to the raw mix, and then exporting at 24 FPS, and then using all of those new video files to create a multicam clip so that I can do my easy editing of just going angle 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to cutting, dragging, dropping, doing all the whoosy whatsies and manual editing. Editing with a multicam clip is so much better. So I don't know if I was just doing something wrong with trying to match everything to 2997, or if you simply need to downsample everything to the lowest frame rate you have, but downsampling to 24 FPS and creating new video files was the only way I was able to actually get it to work. The next lesson that I learned is something that doesn't just apply to audio. This applies to everything. Theory is great, but doing is so much better. I could read all about recording live concerts, mixing audio in general. That's all good, great, and grand. It's good information to have. But actually doing it, hearing everything, and trying to work your way through these issues, as I mentioned, it's like drinking from a fire hose. The information and the knowledge that I have gained from doing it, invaluable. Trying to get the kick drum to sound good, look, the kick is out of phase, gotta invert that. That's something that I understand the theory of it, but I've never really had to focus on that. So actually mixing the full band, the full concert is just so good. So my suggestion is, I know a lot of people out there who are getting into content creation, making videos, recording music. They just get stuck in the research phase, the learning phase. I say just start doing it. Just start making mistakes. And as you make those mistakes, you will learn so much more than you would from just watching videos or reading. Of course, I'm not saying don't watch videos because I make videos about audio. So I'm not saying just completely ignore us, but doing is incredibly important, and I highly recommend just getting started. The last lesson that I learned has nothing to do with the concert, but it has to do something with being live. Last week, I was on the B&H Creator Roundtable with Tom Buck and Luria Petrucci. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it in person, so I had to call in remote. Thanks a lot, airlines. But what I learned, in the past, whenever I have done guest spots on podcasts, I have always made sure to record my audio and also capture the host's audio, and then send them those audio files so they can use them if they want, if they need, if anything went wrong. That is a good practice because sometimes issues happen, sometimes mistakes happen, sometimes there's a bad connection. This time, I did not do it. And there were some audio issues initially, and I really, truly wish I had kept up that practice. I am embarrassed that I didn't. This is an amateur mistake. I have raw audio from, I think, every single guest spot I have done, except for this one. And that is just embarrassing because I would have loved to have been able to send the audio files, the raw wave files, to B&H and say, hey, if you want to use this audio as opposed to the Zoom audio, feel free to do it because it's going to sound significantly better than the Zoom audio because Zoom audio has a very distinct sound. Even before we started, I went in and made sure all of the Zoom processing was turned off. I made sure I was using the highest quality streaming there, and still, it sounds like Zoom audio. I would have loved to have been able to send them that wave file and said, here you go. Here's my audio. If you want to replace it, cool. If you don't, cool. And I am incredibly embarrassed that I didn't do it. Amateur mistake. Those are my audio lessons over the last couple of weeks, and I hope that you can take something away from that. I have just been having so much fun, just actually doing stuff and not just talking about it. I love what I do. Just getting to nerd out about music. It's so much fun. Just recording. How neat is that? This is the best thing ever. best hobby in the world, man. I am a lucky duck, just rocking and a rolling. So as I mentioned, I was supposed to be on travel last week, and 2 weeks ago, or was it 3 weeks ago, I was on travel to go play a concert. And that is why I missed a couple of episodes, but while I was on travel, I wanted to test a microphone because I like testing microphones. I also am incredibly cheap or getting incredibly cheap. I like talking about finances. So in order to, this is so nerdy, in order to test out a microphone, I figured, hey, I'll share some tips on how I'm saving money on travel. And people will think I'm a crazy person. So let's go to Past Hotel Bandrew right now. All right, we are recording in a hotel room. That is because I am on travel. And over the last year, I have become much more frugal. Some might say cheap, and that's fair. And on this trip, I was trying to spend less money, and I identified a couple of ways to save a few bucks on travel, and I thought I would share it with you because it gives me an opportunity to test a lav mic, but also it gives me a chance to talk about how to be cheap. The first thing I did was I packed my lunch before I drove out to where I'm at. So I didn't have to stop at gas stations, I didn't have to stop at fast food restaurants, and I was able to spend $1 on a meal, $2 on a meal, as opposed to $15 now. So it saved me a lot of money there. And then also it was much healthier because when you eat at fast food restaurants, you have an unhealthy option or a more unhealthy option. You don't have anything that's necessarily good for you. So that was the first thing I did, and it was amazing. The second thing that I do is I go down to the front desk at the hotels and say, can I have more coffee, please? And I don't go to coffee shops. I will go ahead and brew coffee in my room and drink that. Is it the best? No. Is it the worst? No. But it's essentially free, not free because you're paying a lot for a hotel, but you get the coffee at no additional charge. If you don't have that option at your hotel, the other way that I was going about it was going to a gas station and just getting coffee there as opposed to going to a dedicated coffee shop because coffee shops are insanely overpriced. And you're not going to get the greatest coffee, but the purpose of coffee for most people, myself included, is just to get caffeinated and move on about your day, because if you don't have your coffee, boy oh boy, do I get angry. Don't talk to me till I've had my coffee. The last thing that I did to save money was, instead of getting breakfast at the hotel, instead of going out for breakfast, I know anybody who's like, I travel for the food, is gonna look at me like I'm an insane person. I brought oatmeal, and you can just heat up water in the coffee maker and then brew a cup of oatmeal in one of the coffee cups. And instead of spending $6, $7, $8 on a bowl of oatmeal at your hotel or a restaurant, you're spending 30 cents, and that's pretty sweet. Am I cheap? Absolutely. Do I like saving money? Yes, because there is much better things to spend money on, like microphones. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. Hopefully this sounds okay and not complete garbage. Okay, bye-bye. Future Bandrew, take it away. Thank you, Past Bandrew. That was incredibly helpful advice, and I'm sure everybody watching will start carrying oatmeal with them when they travel to hotels, because that's not the behavior of psychopaths at all. When people go on travel, what they think is, I would love to eat oatmeal out of this coffee cup in this very sad hotel. I am sure they will pick up on that. But since we are on the topic of finance, I want to get further into the weeds, and this is not audio related at all, but I came across a term for something that I have been thinking about a lot over the last couple of years, and the term is called doom spending. USA News, they describe it as doom spending refers to a phenomenon that occurs when people spend money to cope with stress despite concerns about the economy and foreign affairs, according to a 2023 study by Qualtrics on behalf of Intuit Credit karma. I think this is a perfect term to use to describe that behavior, and this is something that I have been noticing for quite a while, but it became a lot more prevalent around COVID or right after COVID because at that point, everybody was super stressed. It seemed as though the world was ending, so people just thought, hey, I'll buy whatever. But the reason why I think it was occurring before, especially with younger generations, when you grew up, you dealt with 9/11, you dealt with war, you dealt with the financial crisis, then you dealt with COVID. It's just a nonstop barrage of these horrifying events. But then throw in the education where you're taught, hey, global warming. If we don't do enough in the next couple of years, we're all going to die. So if you are brought up as a child, being ingrained with that information and you think the world is going to end, why the hell would you want to save for your future? Why would you be planning financially for the future? And I think that's why we see a lot of this behavior where people don't care about saving in their retirements. They don't care about making sure they can afford what they're buying. They just think, who cares if I can afford it? Let's put it on a credit card and buy this little knickknack that gives me a fleeting sense of happiness, that gives me a little bit of an escape from this doom that is hanging over all of our heads because when we spend so much time on social media, every day is the end of the world. So it makes perfect sense. It may not be responsible behavior. It may not be proper behavior. They should be saving for the future and ensuring they have money to retire. But at the same time, I totally get it. It makes perfect sense. If you think the world is going to end in 5-10 years because that's all you've been told, why the hell would you plan for more than 5 or 10 years in the future? And I think that's going to lead to a lot of problems in the future, a lot of issues in 10, 15, 30 years when people start retiring and they don't have retirements because they just spent all their money. They spent more money than they had because the world was going to end and perhaps it won't. Most likely it won't. The world will go on. Many of us will live on. And we will, hopefully, if we're lucky, if we're fortunate, be able to retire. Don't rely on Social Security. I'll just say that much. I also want to talk about something tangentially related to this. I've had this as a note on a little piece of paper for months. Guilt over spending money. This is something that I noticed as I became more and more frugal. I do like buying nice things. I do like buying high quality items. But at the same time, I have found myself experiencing guilt over that. And I don't necessarily know the cause of that. Maybe it's just I have an incredibly unhealthy relationship with money. And money scares me, and I just want to put it away and not think about it and just save it for a rainy day when I can retire. Or maybe it's the fact that I see other people struggling. Maybe I see other people having difficulties with money or not understanding proper financial etiquette. And when I go out and spend money on something extravagant, a nice meal, going out for coffee, going on a trip, doing any of that, sometimes there's guilt that's associated with that. I don't necessarily think there should be guilt, especially if it isn't overly extravagant, if you aren't flaunting it nonstop saying, hey, look at all these fancy cars I have. Look at all these amazing vacations and beautiful women I'm hanging out with on Instagram. If you're not doing that and you are living a relatively frugal life, I don't necessarily think there should be guilt when you do indulge. But I guess that goes back to just psychology of when you get into these habits, they're incredibly hard to break. And maybe it's my addictive personality. I get addicted to not spending money. That would be a weird thing to be addicted to. I don't know. Is there any point to this? No. Maybe I'll think more about it and have some concrete thoughts, but I just check that off my list. I like checking things off of my to-do list, and that's been sitting on a piece of paper for months, and now I can cross it off. All right, that is it for my rants, my talky talks. Let's go to what I've been testing. I am on the MikTek. What? What's MikTek? The MK300. This is a company, I reviewed one of their microphones before, I think, and I bought this right afterwards. This is a FET condenser, a multi-pattern condenser. I'm on cardioid. I do not have a high-pass filter or pad engaged. I'm running through the Universal Audio X8. I just realized I'm recording 44.1 kilohertz. Gosh darn it. Heckin'. The audio stems I got were 44.1 kilohertz, and that led to me setting my interface at 44.1, and I didn't change it to 48. I am a fool. It'll be fine. It'll be fine, but that's embarrassing. Another amateur mistake. I didn't check my sample rate. But that is the microphone I am using today. I mic'd up my guitar cab and did a little bit of metal guitar on this. This has some deep... I'm going to include a clip right here that I will have in my video. First, a quick sample without the high-pass filter, and then a sample with the high-pass filter. Yeah, that was a lot of bass. This thing has a lot of bass if you want it, so there you go. The high-pass filter is very helpful. That's what I've been testing. Let us jump to what you had to say. First comment comes from Troubleshoot. They say, do you think this podcast would have more success or viewing on Podcastage? How have your experiences been with posting outside of hyper-focused niche, such as reviews only on Podcastage? Troubleshoot, thank you very much for the comment and the question. I really do appreciate it. I believe I've answered this in the past, and I may even have that clipped on Clipscastage. If you don't know, I do have a Clips channel titled Clipscastage, and a little bit later, I'm actually going to include a short that I made for that channel. I wasn't thinking about doing that until just now. Go check out Clipscastage. Do I think this podcast would be more successful or get more viewership if it was on Podcastage? Would it have more viewership? Undoubtedly, yes, because there was a larger subscriber base. Would it have more success? I don't know. It depends on how you quantify success or how you define success. If I was defining success as, does each podcast episode get more viewership than it would on the Bandrew Says podcast channel? I think the answer again would be undoubtedly yes. But if the question was, do these podcast episodes being on Podcastage improve the quality of the channel, improve the performance of the channel, and ensure that everything on the channel gets better? Does it improve performance of all videos on the channel? Or is it dragging the other videos down just to get a few more views on the podcast episodes? I think that is the best way to describe success or define success, rather. And I think it would be the worst case scenario there. I did it for a month. I put episodes on Podcastage, and they did better than they did on the Bandrew Says podcast channel, or at that time, the Geeks Rising channel. But I think the decrease in click-through rate on the episodes compared to my regular reviews harmed the distribution of the other videos on Podcastage, and because of that, I chose to stop publishing there. You can't just define success as, does this video do better? It needs to be, does this video do better, and does it also improve performance of other videos around the release? Does it add value to the viewer? And does it not actually harm the channel? Which I think it did do for me. So would it have more success or viewership? Would it have more viewership? Yes. Would it have more success? If you define more viewership as success, yes, but would it actually harm the channel? Yes. So I think it would be a failure. That's a very long way to go about it. Thank you very much for the question, and I hope that gave you the insight you were looking for. Next, we have a comment from Jesse McCune. They say, as a podcast editor, I understand where you're coming from with editing. It's something we all deal with. One thing I often ask myself when editing is, will someone stop listening or watching if I leave this in? Usually the answer is no. I do commend you, though, because you leave in enough imperfection to let your humanness and personality come through. Many will scrub out so much that there's no personality left. That is always the challenge with editing, and I'm never left thinking, I wish Bandrew would have edited out this weird pronunciation and fun he had with it, or that this video has none of his personality. This is the mark of a good editor, not a neurotic one. Jesse, thank you very much for the comment, and thank you for that incredibly kind conclusion there. I wanted to include this because I think that's really important to discuss. When you edit, it is easy to over-edit, remove all humanity, all humanness, all personality from a show. And if you're able to edit out wasted time without editing out the personality, that is what we should all be aiming for. In the past, I have discussed how to stop saying and how to reduce the use of filler words. My advice was go in and edit them out. The action of doing that is like negative reinforcement. Every time you say that wasted 10 seconds of your life editing. And that is going to create a very strong negative incentive to dissuade you from saying, when you're speaking. So although that may not be the best advice, nowadays it seems as though there's this pushback against over-editing, against sounding too perfect. I still think that is a really good way to go about it if you do use filler words too much and you want to train yourself to stop saying them. Instead of filling every single break with noise, pause. That was a good thought that I just had. Do that as opposed to, I don't know. I guess I had a thought. That's not fun to listen to. If that happens once in a show, fine. Leave it in. But I have heard people speak on microphone that are so, how do I say this kindly? They are people in positions where they ought to be able to speak clearly, concisely, well, and every other word was and I was ready to put my face through a monitor, through a plate glass window. It was maddening. If that is you, where you are saying every other word or using a filler word every other word, do some training, do some practicing. On the note of practicing, I'm going to bring in a clip from my B&H photo talk. Let's go ahead and include that. I wasn't planning on doing this either. This is just a loosey-goosey episode. Here's what I had to say about practicing. As far as the preparing for your show to try to limit the amount of edits, I know a lot of people, they will only record when they're actually recording their podcast. A couple years ago, I wasn't happy with my skill on mic. So instead of just recording on mic for the podcast, I would record every single day. I didn't plan on publishing it, but I practiced every single day because that gives me 365 podcasts essentially to get better at it. And by doing that, that alleviated a lot of the time in editing because I got better at speaking on microphone, at performing, for lack of a better word. So do not be scared of actually practicing podcasting because it is a learned skill.
Yeah. Wow,
Perfect
that's
advice.
A great point.
Wow, thanks, Past Bandrew, and thank you to B&H for having me. If you want to check out the full episode, the full creator roundtable. I will link it in the episode notes. Go check it out. Tom Buck and Luria Petrucci shared so much great insight into podcasting, and I think it's a great place to start if you want to get into podcasting or get a little bit of inspiration, perhaps, different ways to approach things, anything like that. Really ton of fun being a part of that. That is it for what you had to say. Now we are jumping to the value for value section because this is a V for V podcast. Again, I discussed that on the B&H panel. Thank you, Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak, for founding that, starting that, pioneering it, whatever terminology you want to use, and I did make sure I gave them credit. Anyway, value for value. I don't put the show behind a paywall. I don't have any ads. I put the episodes out, and if you get any value out of it, I just ask you return that in whatever way you can. It can be time, talent, treasure. Do you want to make a thumbnail? Do you want to make a short? Do you want to send back financial support? Any and all of that is incredibly helpful. Today we have some financial money as opposed to non-financial money that was sent back to me. First, we have €50 from TechMed. Rainer Richter, goal! He says, I am so obnoxious. This is where editing should be done. Cut out that personality trait. Rainer says, Danke. I just registered for the B&H Roundtable. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend it in person, but I tried to get in virtually. Rainer, thank you so much for the €50. Thank you for the continued support. And I am really actually glad that you weren't able to make it in person because that would have been terrible because I couldn't make it in person. I had everything booked. Everything was booked. And hey, let's go ahead and throw in another clip. As I was leaving for the airport at 4:50 in the morning, I took a video. Let's hear it. Just throw it in there. Why not? Here's a video of that. All right, it's 5 a.m. and I am waiting for my car to the airport. Let's see if all the flights are delayed or if I'm going to make it to the panel. This ought to be fun. Well, Past Bandrew, you are in for some disappointment. Your flight will be delayed, you will miss your connecting flight, and you won't make it to New York City to be a part of it in person. So I am glad you couldn't make it in person because I would have felt awful if you had come in for that and I didn't even make it. So although you couldn't make it, I couldn't either, and thank you again for the support. Next, we have 20 USD from Betty Kev 1. They say, I appreciate the test. Thanks. Kev, thank you very much for the 20 USD, and thank you for the kind words. I'm really glad you enjoyed that test. I had a lot of fun actually making that and getting a much more conclusive answer to that topic, but more importantly, a better understanding of how all this equipment works. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier in the episode where I could learn all the theory. I could read about this stuff all day, but it doesn't get burned into my brain until I do it. There's different types of learning, and reading, a reading word, doing all that, it doesn't work for me. It does not stick. I need to make a fool of myself and do it and then burn it in. That is when I actually learn this stuff. So I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. Thank you for the support. Next, we have 20 British pounds from Kevin Hollingworth, and he says, thanks for answering my Ask Bandrew question. Kevin, thank you very much for the 20 pounds. I really do appreciate it, and thank you very much for sending in the Ask Bandrew question last week, where you gave a couple of microphone samples and let us provide you with feedback on which ones we liked best. There were a number of comments pointing out which one they liked as well, and I hope that was valuable. If you have made a final decision, let us know. It would be great to know what microphone you landed on and what's working best for you. And again, thank you very much for the 20 pounds. Next, we have 14 Canadian from Greg LG, and he says, keep up the good work with the podcasts. Greg, thank you very much for the continued support. The 14 Canadian really does help. All of these keep the show ad-free. All of these help keep the hosting bills paid, make sure all the sites are up and running, so I really do appreciate it, and I'm glad you're still enjoying it and that you think the podcasts are good work. I aim to get up to great work. One day we'll get there. Maybe at episode 500 we will get a great. And lastly, we have 10 USD from MEI Studio New York. Pags, the absolute mad lad and legend, and he says, a little support to make up for YouTube Premium, jerking your chain. Pags, thank you very much for the 10 USD. I really do appreciate it. And if you don't know what he's referring to with YouTube Premium jerking my chain, if you shut off ads on your video, you don't get any of the YouTube Premium revenue sharing. And I got a little bit of pushback there saying, you get the revenue when somebody doesn't see an ad. So if your videos don't have ads enabled, there are no ads being skipped or bypassed, so you're not getting that revenue. I understand that argument, but I still think if you're putting up valuable content on YouTube, valuable videos that people who are premium subscribers watch, you're still a reason why those people are giving money to YouTube through YouTube Premium. So even though you're not giving people the opportunity to bypass an ad, I still think you should receive a portion of that compensation, of that revenue sharing, because you're making videos that premium members are watching. I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much, Pags from MEI Studio, and thank you to everybody who gave super thanks this week. That was a tremendous turnout. If you enjoy this show being ad-free and not being paywalled, it is thanks to the wonderful support of these people, Raina, Kev, Kevin Hollingworth, Greg, and Pags. Thank you guys so much. That is it for super thanks. I don't have any Ask Bandrews pulled, so I am going to go to a weekly recommendation algorithm. And like I said, we're just throwing in every video that we can find. I made a short for the Clips Castage channel, and my weekly recommendation is pizza. What a shocker. And I'll go ahead and let the Clip Bandrew discuss why. Today I got this email from YouTube, and hidden in it, it says, claim your treat. You get a free small pizza from Domino's. So although my hat says everything sucks, today it does not. Pizza time. What is better than pizza time? Free pizza time. It's gonna be so good. Thanks for the pizza, YouTube. Very much appreciate it. Yeah, YouTube bought me a pizza. I have no idea why that was given to the Clips Castage channel. It wasn't given to Podcastage. It wasn't given to the Bandrew Says Podcast channel. It wasn't, I just said that twice. It wasn't given to any of my main channels where I've been uploading for nearly a decade. It was given to the channel where I just re-upload content. I'm not complaining. I deeply, deeply do appreciate it. I know some people will say, oh, they're just buying you off the pizza. Yeah, maybe so. It's nice to feel appreciated, and although it is a small gesture, that's amazing. They don't have to do that, and it's nice of them. So I was glad I got a pizza, not part of my diet, and I gotta say, I remember exactly why I was so unhealthy, because pizza's so good, dude. It's so good. I don't know how else to put it. If I didn't care about my health, I would eat that every single day. If you need evidence of that, just look at me 3 or 4 years ago where I had emergency pizzas in my freezer all the time, and I would just work all day and then cook a frozen pizza. If you need proof of that, just look at me. I love it, and that was a nice treat. That's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for coming by. I'm sorry I missed a couple of weeks. I was on that travel and going out and about. And I missed last week even though I wasn't on travel because I was doing the actual B&H panel on Sunday, so I didn't have time to do all the recording. Saturday was shot because I wasted hours at the airport. Thanks a lot, Delta. But there you go. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will be back. I will be talking at you, with you, about you. I love you. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Whoa, whoa.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.